because I was thinking about it, is for Jordan Con, I'm going to use my vacation days, but if
Yeah,
I
you're
get
gonna have
if I got new vacation days before then, I'd want to use them up, sort of my current ones. But no, I don't get new ones until September.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to know. I know I'm not gonna have coursework come end of July. Like my coursework ends, I think, literally the week before JordanCon, which
Like I
is
talked about with
convenient.
Welcome to Another Turning. I'm Jessie, and my brother Ben and I are on a quest to inform everyone about the upcoming Amazon adaptation of Wheel of Time, our hopes, our fears, and our grand opinions. Follow along as we revisit some of the history of the series' path to the screen and predict what is yet to come.
Welcome to another episode of Another Turning.
Today we're going to be discussing the ways Rafe Judkins and the Wheel of Time team at Amazon could work flashbacks into the show in order to incorporate things like New Spring or Dragon Mount.
Yes, obviously, without the show out yet, and we're trying to keep this spoiler free to what we believe will be in the first season, which is, of course, we try to keep it to the first two books, and I guess in this one, New Spring spoilers potentially, because, we think there might be New Spring content in the first season. Along with that, I'm really bad about this, and I have to do a shout out to our first Patreon, which is Stuck on Arrakis, who it's been like a month since they became a Patreon.
I don't think we've filmed since she became our Patreon.
Yeah, I know we're, for people who are watching or listening to us, I want to apologize. I mean, we're not putting a lot of content out right now, at least for a podcast, because like I said, for the show and trying to keep it spoiler free, it's trying to come up with topics that we want to make inclusive for everybody who are early on in the books, because we don't want to spoil the later stuff. And it's difficult. I mean, we could do show announcements, but everybody's
There's enough
doing
people
super
doing
analysis of the show announcements.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, I guess, if you are listening, if you want to either join our Discord, which will have a link below, or tweet at us at Pod Another and just like give us your ideas. If you have anything that's like, hey, if you guys talked about this, go ahead, feel free to send it to us. We might start doing some spoiler content, and of course, we'll always spoiler warn if we are doing that, just so we have something to talk about, because the conceit when we started this was that we would be reviewing the show, and then everything happened and the show's not out and we don't know when the show is coming out. So if you have ideas,
quick prediction, we've talked about it, I mean, and we're curious if people agree. We disagree. I would hope, maybe I'm dreaming too much, I would think a late June, early July release.
Personally, I think if it was going to be a June, July release, we would have had at least a teaser, not counting, I guess the Moraine thing was kind of a teaser, but at least a teaser and a release date by now if it was going to be a June, July release. Personally, I think it's going to be late August, early September.
But I could agree we should have a trailer or an announcement by now, but we still have 13 days. Is there 31 days in this month or 30?
30.
Well, by the time of this recording, there's still 12 days for the end of the month, and I think if they do one by the end of this month, it would make sense. It's early enough for a June.
I think if it's going to come out this summer, they'll give us the date by the end of May. That gives us another month.
Also, now, of course, if they make an announcement soon, and with everything that's happened, of course, if you're listening to this announcement's been out. JordanCon has been confirmed for this year, and we could get a release on JordanCon weekend.
Could you imagine? I mean, if they if they do it episodic, and I think kind of the leading theory, and I think somebody like posted this, and it was like a shady leak that we don't know how true it is, of the idea that like the release schedule will be 2 episodes the first week and then 1 every week after that. If they do a weekly release, I would be okay with that. If it's going to be a binge release, I don't want my JordanCon weekend to go to waste sitting in my hotel room watching Wheel of Time.
Good point.
But if the premiere if they want to like, or even if they put up like a 15-minute like first episode preview, I'd be okay with that.
My biggest thing, sorry, puppies being very annoying. I don't understand why they would do a 2-episode release and then an episode after that. Why not just do a 2-hour episode release for your first
That
episode?
would be my thought if you're going to do
I was
that.
actually thinking about it with listening to podcasts or re-listening to books and everything and thinking about stuff is I could see how I would do it if I was in control. I would do it as 8 episodes, but I would do a 2-hour first episode and a 2-hour last episode. Because what I would do all of New Spring, and since we're talking about back stories, I would do a complete 2-hour kind of like featurette movie as the first episode of New Spring.
No, I would. So like
or something
back
like
in
that.
the day before this was ever happening, that was like my dream, is that like we would get a TV series, but then New Spring would get a movie. Because I just
feel like New Spring is like a 2.5 hour feature length film, like easily.
If they
like,
do the whole thing as one chunk, you know. But I do like that idea. If you do 2-hour premiere and then a 2-hour finale, that gives you 10 hours to work with. And we've talked about before, if they're doing 10 hours, you can definitely get pretty deep into Great Hunt.
I think you could realistically get the first 2 books if you do it
10 hours. I think 10 hours might be pushing it, especially if they're incorporating New Spring and we don't know how they're expanding Logain's role. I think both of the books might be pushing it, but I think you could get a decent chunk into book 2. But
as I think I said, at the 1 hour length, I feel like to just cover the first book, 6 episodes max. If for covering both the books, completely 10 episodes minimum, so 10 hours.
10 to 12 for both of them.
And I mean, we don't know.
No.
But I guess we should get on to the topic of talking about flashbacks. So
so this is going to have spoilers for New Spring. I'm going to talk and then Eye of the World, obviously. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Ravens prologue, because I guess that could get incorporated. So if you haven't read this, Wheel of Time was published in split editions, the first 2 books, for a young adult audience. They've just split them in half. And in Eye of the World, they included an extra prologue called Ravens. And it's a flashback to Egwene as she's, 9 years old, I think?
I'd have the book somewhere and I could find it and look it up.
It's not worth, I mean, I have it in the German editions include that prologue, but I think she's 9 years old, and it's just kind of a cute little Emmonsfield flashback, so it doesn't really give you spoilers for the series at all, but if you haven't read that, this is going to talk about, I might talk about that a little bit.
Spoilers for early book 2, specifically with Tam, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think that was be included in flashbacks, although it's not a flashback in the books. But
it would make sense.
Know what we're talking about.
And I think we talked about that when we talked about doing the first season. But okay.
Well, my question, real quick, I guess, just generally, how do you feel about flashbacks in TV shows and movies or media?
I think I would prefer a flashback over a monologue 9 times out of 10. So I was actually recently talking to somebody about this with Daredevil season 2 on Netflix. This is dumb comparison. But Daredevil season 2 included the character of the Punisher. And there is this scene that is like the point where I was like, I think I'm bored with Daredevil, where the Punisher is sitting in front of, I think, the grave of his wife and just monologues for 10 minutes about everything that happened. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was just and there was some really great expression work going on. It was a good performance, but I don't want to see that in TV. More often than not, I would prefer a flashback to somebody monologuing about a story. However, there are bad situations I don't know, The Witcher, that did a terrible job. So you have to be careful.
The Witcher's a whole weird thing because it really didn't do flashbacks. It just did multiple timelines. It's
not really flashbacks, but
okay, then I guess here's the thing is because obviously you can do flashbacks differently. And I don't know if your opinion is on a specific way. And I could think of 2 ways to do flashbacks that I think are doable. There's in cartoons, it's always somebody just looks off into space in wavy lines and it jumps back. I'm not talking about that because obviously that's cheesy. But it could be the one style is somebody's like, I'm about to tell you a story about something, and then it kind of fades to, and you just watch the
Mm-hmm.
like scene. We'll use the Battle of Manetheren
Mm-hmm.
for an example in the first book. It can be um Moraine. Wow, I'm having struggles with remembering names. Moraine can start and talk about like, oh, from Manetheren, I'm going to tell you the story, and she can give you maybe like a couple of the leading lines into her story, and then it can fade to you just watch the scene from start to finish of these people marching off, whatever the flashback is. Or the
Right.
other option using the same thing is kind of going between and having like overlays of some of her monologuing the story with just smaller little scenes that are the bullet points of the
Mm-hmm.
story.
Well, and I think so that scene specifically, which technically is a flashback, I want that one done creatively. I don't, and we talked about this when we did like our episode expectations. I want that one to be done in some sort of fun animation way. I think like doing like a shadow puppet type thing because she does her fire would be really
Oh, that's
cool.
another. Oh, I didn't even think
Or
about that as a third option for flashbacks. It's
yeah,
similar to the second one I said, but instead of it being actual scenes, it's more of a creative. Uh,
yeah, just some sort of cool storytelling thing. I think shadow puppets would work.
yeah.
Something like that, I think, would be fun for that. And I think you could do the same thing if you wanted to for Land's backstory, although I think that would be better done with actors and like actually scenes. I think the story of Manetheren is basically the only one I want to see done that way just because it's so unique. It's not
Well,
involving the characters, it's a story about the town. And I think that kind of technique would just make it fun and interesting.
for that one, yes, I know we talked about it. That one is a unique one, and I think it would work that way. And I guess now you've read at least the first book of the Stormlight Archive, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but for people who have read it, when Wit, if you know the character Wit, when he tells
Yes,
his story,
that exactly
that
is what I want the
concept.
story of Manetheren to be. Not
Sorry if you
exactly,
have not.
obviously, but
Sorry if you guys haven't read any of the Stormlight Archive books, but
the
it's a
gist
cool
is
It's similar to
there's.
what we're talking about,
I don't
where
think it's even like it's not really a spoiler, but I guess
he tells
skip
us.
like 2 minutes if you're concerned. But it's a character telling a story, and while he's telling it, there's a fire going, and the smoke from the flames is forming the parts of the story. So he talks about like a man and a woman meeting each other, and then the smoke forms into this man and this woman like dancing or whatever. And that kind of thing would be really cool.
It's something that's been done in a lot of stuff. I feel like, did Mulan do something like that, or Anastasia? No, Anastasia, when
Anastasia does
she's in the
it.
ballroom and all the
Aw,
like, dust creating the dancers. I think
such a beautiful scene.
that kind of creative
Hmm.
concept for Manetheren
Yeah.
would be
Or
really well
the thing
done.
I always compare it to is in the movie for Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when Hermione tells the story of the three brothers. The way
Oh
that scene's
yes,
done, and it's like paper cutouts telling the story, like something like that. That's just a little
but
creative.
it fit
It's not actors, it's not people. It's a storytelling moment. You know?
and it fits with the way Moraine's doing it is because it's described in the book. Her staff lights on fire, so you can use like her magic, and maybe the weaves are creating a story or an image for us. And it might be interesting on maybe she is doing that herself, and she actually is creating the story if they wanted to add in
That would be
something not
cute.
from the books, or it could be purely for the audience sake, so the villagers aren't seeing it, but we are. Um, but other than that, I guess other flashbacks. What other
Um,
ones? We talk about New Spring. Okay, New Spring's the big one, I guess. Do we want to get into that, or do we want to?
Why don't we do the little stuff first, and then we can circle
Okay.
back to New Spring.
Um.
So I guess
So
Dragon
we've
Mount,
talked
the first
Dragon
one.
Mount. I think we talked about this a little bit in our episode breakdowns. And this is another one where I said I could see doing a special hour long just Dragon Mount premiere. But when they're doing streaming services, they don't do that anymore.
Almost,
Really,
it's almost like a pilot. It'd be an interesting
yeah, like a
pilot.
pilot.
Yeah.
Because it's connected to the story, but it's not actually the story. Oh, now the dog's gonna come in and join me.
He doesn't make as much noise. It's fine.
Okay. Well, except for when he was walking across the floor. But adding it in as flashbacks is difficult, and that's the only reason why I say doing it.
I don't want to get into spoilers for later series. I think Dragonmount should be held off. And I guess if you know in the first 2 books that Rand is Lews Therin Talaman Reborn. He's the Dragon Reborn. So without getting into too much details, I want to experience it as a flashback as Rand's memories. You know what I mean? Like, I want it to be later on he dreams it and incorporate it in that way.
Issue, because you just said he's Lews Therin Telamon. No, if you don't include the prologue, he's the Dragon Reborn.
True.
I don't know if they explicitly mentioned that the dragon is Lews Therin Telamon.
I think
you have
they
no
do.
idea what the dragon is.
I feel like it does at some point, and like they could easily have that. Moraine, when she's talking about it, the dragon, Lews Therin Telamon, could just be included. Or you don't know his name, and Rand's having this dream, and you don't realize until the end that this is the dragon. I just don't. I find it so hard to figure out where that would fit in the first book worth of content. And so I think it would fit really good later on, maybe during the book 3 progression, maybe somewhere in the book 6 progression, without saying specifically. But I think that's the kind of thing that can come later as like a flashback of something and in a dream is experiencing.
Yeah, I see that. The other way it could be incorporated, because like I said, is without that prologue, if you hear the Dragon Reborn, we get told people's superstitions about what the Dragon Reborn is early on in the first book, but we don't really know. You might be able to, in the prologue, he's called the Dragon, he's called Kinslayer, and you can connect those things with some critical reading skills. I think those are the words I want. But in a show without that prologue, I guess it would be best is either Tom telling a story about the dragon for a reason, or Moraine explaining what the dragon is. You could do flashbacks to maybe not Dragonmount specifically at that point, but
right, because they wouldn't know that. And honestly, here's another thing. If we're talking about this, if we're talking in terms of like flashbacks throughout the whole show, not just first season, but throughout the whole show, I am totally for us seeing more of the War of Shadow and more of the Age of Legends. If we're talking full series, like, I'm fine if they have more flashbacks to the War of Power. I think one, it helps like teach us about the Forsaken, because like there's a lot of meta knowledge about the Forsaken that comes from like the glossary or other books. But there's also the information that we learn about the Forsaken throughout the series. And I think those kind of things are really interesting stuff that could be portrayed in sort of flashback sequences to like the War of Power. So I think all of that can be fit in other ways.
Sorry, trying to calm my puppy down a little bit.
Jeez.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. The biggest thing is why I say explanations, you can do flashbacks, and it might not be Dragonmount. She doesn't want to settle down. Is because we get some explanations about the use of sight in, the male half of the power. So explanations about the things to get flashbacks to the 100 companions sealing the Dark One. And I'm trying to remember the end of the first book. Does Alzamon give any kind of explanation about Lews Therin being crazy? Or
yeah, so that's the whole Dragonmount sequence, the prologue that explains that, because it's Lews Therin Telamon wandering through his palace looking for his wife, and then Ishamael shows up and is like, hey, don't you remember me? Haha, oh, you're crazy. Let me cure your craziness. Oh, look, you murdered your family. And then he kills himself. I'm just
trying to think if does Baalzamon at any point kind of throw similar accusations at Rand in the end of the Eye of the World when they're battling?
Maybe. I think he does. I think he makes comments about Lews Therin killing his entire family to Rand.
So that is one point where I feel like actual Dragonmount, other than if we do what you said, Rand has a dream and it's his own stuff. if somebody's explaining that kind of concept as a taunt, and this is a change they could make if they wanted to, not going exactly by the book, but Baalzamon could be like, look, oh yes, because he mentions I was the one who
I was there when when he did the act that named him Kinslayer or something like that.
So he could, while taunting Rand in the final battle of the Eye of the World, could be throwing these accusations, and at that point they maybe could show some flashback, or I would only say small snippets.
Vague. Like it would be like flashes of like
static images of like a man in a palace with dead bodies on the ground, or some similar things, not full flashbacks, and we might get the full story in later seasons with the dream type stuff potentially that you mentioned.
But that's something I think it's important. It really is, but I think opening it with it for a TV show is just a weird choice.
Well, this goes into you talking about the Ravens prologue, and there is one way to incorporate Dragon.
I just really love the Ravens prologue, okay? It's so precious.
If they wanted to do a cold open with the Ravens prologue, it's
not exciting.
It would make for a weird episode.
I mean, I love it, don't get me wrong, but it's not exciting.
The one thing it did by adding in the Ravens prologue, and obviously in a show they could change it, is I feel like it was an interesting way, because if I remember right, towards the end of that prologue, Tam start to tell a story, and it's the story he's telling that's
it's in the middle of it, actually.
I know it's not.
I only have it in German right now, so it's not easy for me to sit here and try to translate it, but it's Egwene's looking for the boys, and then they take a break from that, and Tam tells them a story. He's like, you've been working so hard, let me tell you a story. But he tells him about what? I don't remember what the story is.
It's something to do with
it's definitely something that like Egwene would be like, Nynaeve wouldn't like them to be telling this story or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember exactly. For some reason in my mind, and maybe this is because I haven't read a lot, is for me, it feels as though like he told the story of Dragonmount from a storytelling standpoint. Not that he actually did, but in my mind, that's what it feels like. And it's how it's stuck in my head. So it's the one thing that makes the Dragonmount prologue almost make sense.
If they do it like somebody tells the story, and yeah, that could be. There it is.
Oh, he tells the story of how they led the 100 companions to Sheol Ghul and sealed the Born to the Dark One's prison.
Yeah.
That's from a synopsis online.
From
thegreatblake.com, actually. But for me, it was the one way that you could, other than doing some weird, because obviously nobody else was there, and even technically, so there wouldn't be a story. Nobody would know.
Yeah, nobody remembers
other than.
So if you include Baalzamon taunting Rand about it, possibly. But I think the idea is save it for a little bit later when Rand's a little bit crazier, and have him dream it. I think getting hints, like you said, getting those like flashes of it, and even I know we talked about like dream sequences in the Eye of the World and how they're already a little excessive, so I wouldn't want to do it then unless it's the only one they do. But having him have those flashes, like when he's just having general nightmares and you like see those scenes, this is something they do in like horror movies a lot, where somebody's like tossing, turning, and you're getting like flashes of the things they're seeing. You could do it that way, where he's getting those images and have that lead up through like the first season, maybe through the second season, and don't get the explanation till later, build the suspense on it.
I don't want to spoil, but for people who have read the series, I could do this. I think it would be a perfect inclusion into the events of book 3.
That's what I was thinking. Book 3 would fit really nicely when that's going on.
If you've read the books, you probably understand why.
Yeah. The only other option would be book 6, but I think it should be done before then. I think that's getting a little too late.
Yeah, at that point, it's like, who cares anymore? It's important, but
no, but they need to know before then.
Third, fourth, fourth, maybe fifth season of the show. Like we're,
Probably
I don't know. I don't
fourth
want to
would be
try to
my
plan
guess.
out the whole show.
Anyway, fourth would be
So
my guess,
okay,
but yeah, that's a little
so
late. So yeah, Ravens is cute. I think Ravens is super cute, but I personally can't see a way to include it unless they did like
well, you
just as a
brought it
fun
up,
like.
so
Oh, I just brought it up because it is a flashback that happens, but um unless they do like it as a cute little like special they released between seasons or something. But like
that's one way.
I don't think it would be worth it for them to get young actors and actresses to play these characters just for this one moment, as cute as it would be. And I think it does a lot to establish, well, particularly in the books, Egwene's character. Like, it really shows a lot of how Egwene thinks. But it also shows like a young Matt, and it shows Matt being mischievous yet
Himself.
responsible. And it shows Perrin being like boring, bless his heart, but like he's like, let's not do any fun things. And you know, it,
He's a wet blanket.
yeah, that's a word for it. Um, so I think it does a lot to establish like the character of these kids, but like I can't see a way to do it in the show, unfortunately. As much as I would love it to be in the show in some way, I just don't see it
Yeah.
practically working.
Yeah, no, there's not a lot. It wouldn't make sense. There's only that actually from the written word, uh, Ravens is the only we have of their childhood life, other than the few times in later books where people might mention things that
People
people did in the
reminiscing.
past, which would be times for flashbacks, but not to Ravens. It'd be to other events. The
Right. But
only
even those
potential,
moments aren't really worth flashbacks. They're like, remember, ooh, excuse me. They're like, remember that one time Matt did this one thing? It's not like a story. It's like, here's
yeah.
this thing, you know?
So I could no, I don't see how they could include Ravens. And I'm with you. It does make Egwene's character better because I know we've talked about Egwene. You love her. I'm indifferent, I guess, mostly for her. I very have not negative feelings for her in the first two books. I just find her annoying. Now with the Ravens prologue, that does change her character a lot in the first book.
It just gives you a
Because
lot of perspective because it shows
yeah,
you
it
that
gives you
Egwene
so
is
much.
driven, like so driven. Um, and it just shows like the kind of goals she has and like the way she goes about achieving them. It also shows you a lot of like what's expected of her in a certain way. And like I just think it just tells you a lot about Egwene. Um,
Yeah, and without it, Egwene's decisions in the first book don't seem very
they
like
seem a little irrational and crazy.
yeah.
um,
So you
but what
don't
I
get that driven concept unless you're purposely thinking, oh no, you're giving an excuse that she's driven without the Ravens
yeah.
prologue. It's not written that she's driven
Well,
without
because
the
we don't
Ravens
get her
prologue.
perspective in the first book.
Yeah,
And we don't even get that much of it in the second book, honestly. And that's just it. And Egwene in the first book comes across as kind of annoying because we aren't seeing what she's thinking. We're getting it all from Rand and briefly from Perrin's perspective. And so,
exactly.
yeah, I think just that moment of being in her head really helps you understand her. And so, like, here's where I think, like, it might not make it into the show, but I do think that like Rafe Judkins, Madeline Madden should have read it to get a good idea of her character. That's kind of what
I
I
mean,
think.
I don't know if they need to because for acting, it's nice when you have source material like this, obviously, because you can get the original author's intent. But for Rafe Judkins, as he's writing the show, he's giving these characters their motivations. He knows these things. The writers are doing things. They're not going to be exactly like they are in the book
No,
potentially.
obviously.
But he as the showrunner, and I mean obviously we know he's read the whole book, but he knows where the end is.
Right.
So him and a few people in the writing team need to know where is the end of the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
And then lower down, these people need to know where is the end of season 1. Because you got to get your characters there. So you got to give them believable motivations early in their character development.
Right, and that's what I'm
Even though you
saying. Like,
have the source material, it's
That's what I'm
not as
saying
important
is
for an actor. Yes,
not
they
so much for the
have it,
actor, no, but for the writers. I hope they like took that into account when writing her character, I guess is the way
yes,
to say
and
that. Because
with the people they have.
otherwise, season 1 of Gwen is going to be obnoxious. I'm going to love her anyway, but she might be a little obnoxious.
But here's the thing: is this is what's the reason why I don't think the Ravens prolong is needed is because obviously in a show we're not in everybody's head. We're not in specifically just Rand's head. We get to see Egwene be Egwene without random people's being skewed by a certain character's viewpoint. So I can't hear it. So I mean,
You don't hear the
but
motorcycle?
oh, is that what that was? I don't know. I just on like it's quiet enough background. But so from a show point of view, you don't need the Ravens prologue. Every character is going to stand based on how the character is portrayed.
Right, but so like what I was saying though is just like it's something that can inform the writers about the characters in order to help how they write the characters, I guess is where I was getting at there.
It
But
would. And I mean, this is an interesting thing when you have source material. And I mean, I can't talk 100% for in the professional world. My acting experience is only goes into college, but it's somebody needs the knowledge somewhere. But as long as you are writing, this is the character I want, you could get away with it. It's nice to be informed. And like I said, the actor is. I only once, I think we did a Jungle Book production for children's theater. We were required to read the Jungle Book by the director. And that comes to people higher up making that decision or an actor deciding to do it on their own. But the actual script and instruction from your directors should be enough that you don't need to read it. That's a personal choice for each person.
yeah, that's what I've seen mostly is that it like depends on the actor. Some actors don't like reading the source material because they don't want it to affect their performance. Other actors like reading the source material just so they have a little more background. But like ultimately, it should be the directors and the writers conveying
That
the
know
important
that stuff, yeah.
information to the actors.
So I guess one
Land's
one other
backstory
small thing. Tam and Lan.
and Land.
Lan and Tam. Um I mean, they're small stuff. I think again, it's Lan's backstory. We're getting told it by somebody, and they can either do. I'm fine with either way. I like them mixing it up. So depending on how they do it, and I would use Lan and Tam, not the other ones. Anything else? If they do one of them, I'd want it to be, and I think Lan's would be better, where they could be like he starts to tell the story, and we just see like a 5-minute clip of
that story.
him being evacuated as a child. Gosh, that sounds weird. What's the better word? Him escaping as a child with his guards and seeing some snippets there.
Yeah.
And maybe some overlaying narration about what's going on. And same with Tam, because it's in the meeting with the Armelin Sea. Again, it could be
that's kind of a lot of, I mean, if we get, and I think we all pretty much think we're going to get through Fall Dara in the first season. That's a lot of flashback.
Well, we're saying not Dragon Mount stuff at all, potentially.
Yeah, well, it's all going to be at the back then, though. I mean, and we haven't even gotten to New Spring, but that's like the last like 2-3 episodes are going to have a lot of flashback.
And I mean, Lan's. I would, if I were going to get rid of one, I'd be more willing to not have Lan's backstory
that early. I think we still need Lan's backstory at some point, but it can come later. It doesn't. The only reason I would want it in the first season is for Nynaeve and Lan's relationship, because the only reason Nynaeve's not pursuing that relationship is because, well, no, Lan kind of tells her he's not. So I guess it's fine if we just don't get that reason immediately. So we get that like he rejected her, but we don't get to know why until later.
But the thing is his backstory. You can have the long version, or you can have his parents were the king and queen of Malkir. They died, and he escaped.
Yeah, but that's so sad and unimpressive. Like,
I know. I'm
No,
giving
but
it.
like I get what you're saying, and I think you could totally have like Lan rejects Nynaeve, and he doesn't really explain why. He just says like something vague about revenge, avenging what cannot be defended. And you could even get him giving that little like speech, the to stand against the shadows so long as yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Um, but we don't get the context. We can even the main reason I would want Lan's backstory though is because they travel through Malkiar. And I just want that emotional impact of seeing the towers, seeing the lakes, and knowing what they meant, especially if we just got Lan's backstory in film. So you're
I
seeing the
guess.
same landscape, but instead of this beautiful, sparkling lakes and glorious, shining towers, and then they transition to them walking through Malkiar and it's decrepit and disgusting. I think there would be such a good emotional impact there, but you can't have that if you don't have that story first.
Well, right there, you gave another reason why I could see his back. Well, a full-on backstory flashback being cut is we. There's lots of talks of how many sets they have to build and how
Yeah.
much stuff they have to do to include a either CGI or whatever completely
I
created
think it would be
Malkier,
CGI, Malkier.
but CGI, but to include having to develop a complete Malkier in its prime, as well as then have them travel. I could see them cutting them even stopping at Malkier,
Oh.
because then having it's for it
No, I
makes
get
that
what you're saying. It's
it
one
makes
less
that scene
set.
more emotional. It makes that scene slightly more emotional, but it's really not
No, it's not. It's not
that
important.
important.
But
I could see them cutting out maybe they have the seven lakes, but the towers are completely ruined, so you don't see
right,
them.
that's what I was thinking is you could have like I think if they do it, Malkier in its heyday would be CGI. I don't think they would build that by any means.
But even I know they wouldn't build it, but even still from CGI, that is another huge
Right.
CGI thing to create.
Right.
So I could see that's part
I
of the
could see
reason.
them cutting it, but that's I think okay. If they stay at Malkiar, they need to have that backstory first. But I could see them just cutting that and they just travel through the blight.
I could see them having the backstory, but I could see it being done a little bit more monologued and a lot less flashback for that one. Because that story can be told, it's not really that long. It can be told without it being too long.
Yeah, they could
Um,
trim it down. You also need
and it's
to there's the other element of that needs to be established that I can't say. But
I'm not sure what you're talking about. We can talk when we're done with the episode because I'm not 100% sure what you're talking about.
mhm.
Um,
There
the
are
thing is,
other people in that flashback that end up being important.
oh, yeah, okay. But it's just that one is, and also the scene that's happening at the time. It's you have everybody's in the room, and while that story is going on, it might be interesting to see how all of a sudden everybody who's super nervous and then to see them being captured by the story. So
Yeah,
you can get
actually,
away
that would be
without doing a
cute.
flashback there.
Yeah, we had also talked about, I think when we did our episode predictions, we had talked about having it interspersed with Fane and Moraine's interrogation.
True. So you
So
can
there are
break up
ways
the
you could
story a little
definitely
bit.
do that. I just think
So
the
that
emotional impact of seeing that transition from beautiful utopian, not utopian, but beautiful Malkiar to ruined Malkiar would be so good, but I definitely understand
yeah.
the practical restrictions there.
Well, you're the one who brought up it's a lot of flashbacks. So I'm just trying to be realistic if they're trying to cut back on how much they're doing it. Because I think getting the Tam one, because it's just Moraine, Swan, and Rand sitting slash standing in a
I
room
think
talking.
Baron's there too. Is
Oh,
Baron
and
there?
Baron. Yes. No. Yes. Yes. She is. But the three of them and him just being in a room and they're having this meeting. It's much better to break up that one with a flashback
Oh
of
yeah,
some sort for
yeah,
Tam's backstory.
yeah. But
And
given the choice between the two of them, I would take Tam's over Lance. Yes.
I also think it's because we talked we could maybe get rid of hearing Land's backstory at that point. Tam's I think is maybe also slightly if for the similar reasons, well, okay, not similar reasons in the fact that, Land's backstory helps inform the Nynaeve Land relationship. But for Rand is and I hope this is one thing I hope they cut down on a little bit, and maybe because we won't be in Rand's head, it won't be as bad. Is the oh my gosh, is Tam really my father stuff can get a little annoying in the first book or two.
It's, I think it is annoying, but it's understandable, and I think almost it'll be better not being in Rand's head.
Yeah.
Um, but there's that beautiful moment in book 2 where Land's like, "Look, where I come from,
Oh,
the
the
man who
beginning of
raised
the
you,
book.
yeah, the man who raised you is your father. That's what matters." And I think that really helps Rand. Um, but
That is
yeah,
a great line, and that line connected with getting Tam's backstory and giving a little bit more perspective can help. It's part of the Rand Tam dynamic of his belief in his father, and I hope, because I'm trying to think of the books. I don't know when he finally like makes up his mind about that. There's no like closure, kind of. He just
so no, there is a moment, and I don't remember which book it's in, but there is a moment where he kind of accepts it. And then of course there's the stuff in the last few books, but in
oh
the
yeah.
last, but there is a moment, and I don't remember where it is. I think it's maybe in book 4 or book 5, um where he has a moment where it's like, Tam's not my father, but it doesn't matter, kind of. But
But I would almost be willing to allow like getting Tam's backstory here. They could, as part of an episode, kind of like they they could have him get over it then and there. That be his closure. Hearing this story, talking to Land, getting that explanation from him, maybe he accepts it, just because we might not see it as much, so it might not be as big of a problem. But it's like I hope they don't all of a sudden like bring it up again in season 2. It's like, oh, is Tam really my father? It's
no,
pointless.
it
It
would be
doesn't.
nice to have that not wrapped up, because obviously that's something he can still struggle with, but get that confirmation that no, you aren't Tam's biological son. I think having that wrapped up in season 1's a good idea.
Um, and, and it might, obviously there's still a lot of emotions there because end of book 2 stuff, even though it might not be in season 1, we're not sure if it's in season 2. That brings up a very interesting concept, specific things about that. That even if he has accepted that Tam's not his real father, there's emotional stuff with it. But okay, those are the smaller things. I guess we should get on to new spring content.
Yeah, we don't have that much time left, but we can talk New Spring.
Well, real quick, so this is,
Yeah,
well, we can go through it quick because there's a lot in
yeah,
new
we definitely have
spring.
time.
The biggest thing is we already, if I remember it, we have a young Swan Sanche has been cast.
There was a leak that
Was it a leak?
very, yes, it wasn't confirmed. A very young Swan Sanche was cast, and as far as I'm aware, she's cast for season 2. It wasn't a season 1 cast, I think. Now,
Oh,
don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure the person that found it said that she wasn't filming. She's doing season 2. I don't remember for sure, but she's very young. She's like not novice age. She's like 12, 10 or something. I'm really bad at judging children's
I don't know.
ages.
All the information that comes out, I can never remember what stuff is leaks and what stuff is
Yeah,
official.
the
Oh, I know what stuff.
young Swan
I know
Sanche was a leak.
100% what is 100% full or confirmed. Okay, I just remember seeing that once, and I what the heck it was. Okay, so that was a leak. Okay, never mind. Disregard. Doesn't matter. Scrap it from the
um,
everything.
but I think here the only thing, honestly, for season 1, I think we definitely need is Katara's foretelling. I think the rest of New Spring I want eventually, but for season 1 alone, the only thing we have to have is the foretelling. I would like the rest of it also, but or not all of it. I don't think all of New Spring is going to be in season 1. I think if we get New Spring
Yeah.
stuff, it's going to be focused, in my opinion, it's going to be focused on Swan and Moraine and their time in the tower more than the quest for the Dragon Reborn, more than a Moraine and Land meeting. I think it's going to be focused on Moraine and Swan personally.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Real quick, Kareen Nagashi. Kareen Nagashi. Who is she?
She is an Aes Sedai that was killed by the Black Aja in New Spring.
So see, she has been cast.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was a casting that made it feel like there's definitely going to be New Spring related things. Although there's speculation that maybe they just, I don't know why they would change. There's so many Aes Sedai to pick from. But that is the one thing. So they have officially cast at least one person that, from all we know, at least by book wise, is only in New Spring. I'm trying to look up something because I'm going to look her up on the Wheel of Time companion because I want to know more about her. But yeah, I'm with you. I think the prophecy is pretty important. But then again, we're then adding 2 flashbacks in the Moiraine Swan.
It could be one flashback. It could be Moiraine telling the story. It could transition very smoothly from Moiraine telling the story of hearing the prophecy to Swan or Moiraine telling the story of Tam finding Rand on Dragonmount. You could even have a really cool shot there of starting in the Amyrlin Seat study where that happens and then panning across to Dragonmount. You could have a really cool parallel shot there.
Oh, I honestly, that whole meeting, I almost want to say is just narration overlaying flashbacks for most of that meeting in a weird way.
Yeah. And moments of Rand's face.
It's, well, I'd have to look up exactly how the meeting goes depending on it. I would say the meeting he comes in, and pretty much from the point that he's told, you're the Dragon Reborn, onwards, all the explanation for Tam's not your real father, this is the prophecy, all that stuff is like, yeah, narration. So we need to see the stress he gets in from getting confronted for that.
Right. Well, and I think we need to see his face during the story about Tam as well. Not all the time. And I think we can kind of switch between the flashback and what's happening in the room. And I think I personally think you want some of Varen's face for that too.
Potentially.
Potentially.
That's why I said specifically for that flashback would be more of the like narration with the snippets of like short 7 to 10 second scenes, so to speak. I don't know exact timing.
Yeah.
Film. But I think, yeah, that would definitely, for most of that meeting, there she is. Okay, so she's not the Aes Sedai I was thinking about. There's one Aes Sedai from New Spring that I think would be cool to have in for reasons dealing with a certain warder.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I think it would have been more interesting if she was. That's another thing. So much from New Spring, but unfortunately, so much of it would make the most sense to have the flashbacks be in season 1.
Not really. So the thing with reading New Spring is that it's got a lot of stuff that read almost like Easter eggs. Like it's this is where that person was. So I don't think those are necessary to have in the first season. I guess. I just don't see how we're gonna. I mean, and it obviously depends on how much of book 2 they include. I just don't know where we would find the time to do all of it. And I think it's okay. So personally, I would save the Moiraine and Lan stuff for post probably season 3, book 5 events. I think I would have the Lan stuff coming in after that. Personally,
I don't know. I guess the biggest thing, and this is probably why in my mind I thought doing like a 2-hour featurette of like a New Spring movie.
What I want. I just want a New Spring movie.
There is just trying to incorporate all the information, because there's a lot of good information we get from New Spring. I'm not talking about them, but there's so much. But to incorporate all of it, even throughout all of the series of Wheel of Time, all the flashbacks to New Spring, breaking it up into a bunch of flashbacks, it really is just.
And it's excessive. A weird thing to break up. Like, it's clearly meant to be a story that's told in one go. And so to try to break it up also feels kind of weird. To try to not have it all coherent and together. I haven't read it yet, but New Spring, before it was a novella, started as just a short story. And I have like the collection that it was published in. And I have to actually read that. What? It's like
I thought it was the same length almost. I don't know how much
no,
they
I
added.
mean, um,
Yeah, I know it was originally published in one of the like short story collective book things, whatever those are called.
anthology.
Anthologies. See, she
Yeah.
knows her stuff. Um,
Um, I don't know. Oh, that's where that art comes from. Anyway, sorry. The end pages art is like a Wheel of Time art, and I was trying to remember where I'd seen it from and where it had come from.
okay. And
Um,
it's such a good story. It gives, and especially because Amazon on Prime has made Moiraine such a pivotal character.
mhm.
She's the focus of all of their like what little advertising stuff you could say, like the description, and they just their last announcement with Moraine, there being a big focus on Rosamund Pike being Golden Globe. Is that the correct one?
Yeah, I think she
She
just
won
got
a
a
Golden
Golden
Globe.
Globe.
There's been a lot of focus on her. So doing a like, even if they don't do it as part of the season, maybe releasing it like
It's like 95
doesn't.
pages.
How big is New Spring?
It's like 95 pages. I don't know how long New Spring is. I think New Spring is like 250. I don't have it, so I can't check, but it doesn't matter.
But it's
But yeah,
just
no,
one of
this
those
is
things.
considerably shorter.
So that's why I just feel like it would make sense with the huge focus on Lorraine, them doing it would make sense to do it as a pre-release almost.
I mean,
To
I
the
would be okay with
series.
that. I would be super happy if they just were like, surprise, here's a New Spring movie.
But the problem with that is obviously they would have had to do it separately.
Right.
I could see it maybe
My
being between season 1 and season 2. I would almost say cut out any flashbacks to New Spring, except for maybe, like I said, the prophecy. That's the only one I think we need.
Yeah. My
Potentially.
thing with starting with New Spring, and it's the same reason I tell people not to start with New Spring if they're reading the series for the first time. Personally, I feel like Moraine's character is better if you don't understand what she's doing at the beginning. And I think you lose that mysterious element of Moraine and Lan if you already know what their quest is. You know why they're there. And then it starts to be, well, okay, then Rand's the Dragon Reborn almost immediately because you're like, that's who she's looking for. This is where she is.
I
So I
guess.
think you
True.
kind of lose something there if you already know what Moraine is doing. I think for the first
I didn't think
season,
about that.
you need that prophecy, you need that foretelling. I personally would like some flashbacks with Moraine and Swan because this is one of the few times we see them interact on screen. And so, like, I think it'd be neat if we understood their relationship a little bit more. But again, Swan's not coming in until the last couple episodes. And so that could also be a little bit in season 2. Um, but it's tough to do it because it doesn't feel like it should be broken up. Like it's not meant to be chopped up that way.
Yeah. And that's why I think I'm leaning towards having a flashback to the foretelling and then nothing else from New Spring and releasing it between seasons as a featurette movie. The whole
I would
of
be
New Spring.
so down for that. If they just released New Spring either between season 1 and season 2 or maybe after season 3, like depending on the pace of the thing. But what I'm assuming will be in season 3. If they put New Spring after season 3, like I think that'd be perfect. Just make New Spring a movie, release it in theaters. I'm for it. I want to go watch New Spring on a big screen in a movie theater, eat my popcorn, and
I mean, I would love it to be released to theaters, but even if it's just released
on Amazon.
Amazon.
Does Amazon do original movies? I assume they do.
Yes, they do. Because I feel like I've watched at least one. I can't find the word count for the original anthology edition. I'm annoyed.
The page count is like 95 pages. I just showed you that. It's like 85, 90 pages.
That's page count.
I don't know what the word count is.
Yeah, I know, but because pages, because this is saying 400 pages for New Spring, but what is the novel size of that versus the anthology's like text size and stuff, stupid things like that. Because like I could bring up the Kindle version of the of New Spring, but I don't think that would really give me a good comparison either. Actually, I might not have the Kindle version of New Spring.
Oh,
Sorry,
I do have the Kindle version, but
random stuff I'm thinking of. But yeah, it would be wonderful. It's the best way to do New Spring. Everything else, the only other scene in New Spring I'd want to see as a flashback if we weren't going to get a movie of it. I'm saying I could care. I would love it, but I could say you don't need any other New Spring content if they were not going to do a movie because I don't feel like having it.
yeah,
There's only one other scene I
I
would
don't.
want,
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
and that would be the Moiraine throwing Lan into the pond.
Um, so like personally, yeah, you're right. Other than the prophecy, there's none of it that we need. Stuff that I would like to have from that. I think that's a great moment. Moraine and Lan meeting, beautiful. Needs to be. If I don't get to see that on film,
in the main series.
That's true. It is. I think based on like my very rough calculations, this is probably around like 38,000 words.
Okay.
But yeah, Moraine and Lan meeting. I need to see that on footage. I need to see that on film. Like I don't, and then them bonding. I would like to actually see them bonding.
The end of New Spring there.
Yeah, like the actual end. The one that's the ebook cover.
Underwhelming. It's very underwhelming.
A little bit, but I think it's a good like character moment. And I guess it probably has less impact if you haven't read New Spring to just have that scene, but I think it would be a good one.
But that's the only stuff when you really think about it, the important stuff.
I mean, like I said, I would really like Moraine and Swan's completely selfishly. I want Moraine and Swan's relationship developed. And I think it's cool to see Lan and see how he's kind of stayed the same. I think it's great to see how much Moraine has changed. And like I said, I think if I was going to put it in the show, I would put a lot of that flashback content. I can't talk about it without spoilers, but I have a very specific sequence in mind for like where I would want it. But like I would have it in like season 3, 4-ish is I would have flashbacks to that. But personally.
But I feel like I said, breaking up New Spring into a bunch of flashbacks would be bad because yes, there's a story to New Spring, but when you really look at New Spring, it is a prequel about character development.
Mm-hmm.
And for the core series, well, I mean, there isn't like a bunch of other stuff, but for the series as a whole, the story we have, the Wheel of Time, the important things that come from New Spring is the prophecy. Mm-hmm. That is a big
No, you're right.
That affects the
story. If they cut out the rest of New Spring and only include the prophecy, I would be satisfied. I just
would be
sad.
I do think though is because unless they create new stuff that isn't included in the book to show some of the character development and some of the personality of Moiraine and Lan's relationship, seeing, because like I said, it is directly referenced in the book and it is the first hint we get at beyond the stoicness of their relationship when it's referenced
almost,
in the book.
Honestly, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I'm telling you, if I don't get to see that in film, I will be writing a letter to Rafe Judkins. But mostly though, it's weird out of context. Like it's a funny line in the book, but it's kind of weird out of context to just be like, remember that time I threw you in a lake? Let's flash back to that time I threw you in a lake. Haha. You know, it's kind of jarring and weird out of context. Doesn't mean I don't want it. But even if it could be a preview, it could just be like, hey, Rosamund, Daniel, come over here. I need you to do this for me. And just release a clip of them doing it. Henny.
Is his name Daniel?
Daniel Henny.
Oh,
Rosamund Pike.
Sorry, I'm getting actors mixed up.
And just have them do the scene just for fun. I'd be fine with that too. Just a scene of Daniel Henny throwing Rosamund Pike in a lake. Just do it.
All right. All seriousness though. Rafe Judkins or anybody else who works on the show, if you are listening to this at this time, there must be a featurette film of New Spring.
That's really what I would like. And that's what I've been wanting literally since I read this series. I was like, TV series, but a movie for New Spring.
I would almost be content with just a New Spring movie. Like before the
If we,
show was announced, where
yeah.
we were at like 3 years ago, before all of this, when we had nothing, I would have just been happy with a New Spring movie.
You know what else
Honestly, I
I
would have just
want?
been happy for what?
I want a trilogy of the Age of Legends and the War of Shadow, but that's a whole other thing.
Well, what I really want is to just be able to like experience all of this in some other medium, like
Mm-hmm.
at all. Good video games, board games, everything. I want it all.
With virtual reality now, you could have a really cool game with like casting weaves.
Amazon. I don't know who has rights for making the video game if it's
I
under
that might
Amazon
still
now.
be Red Eagle.
I don't know. Amazon, if you are listening and you're the ones who have the rights to the video games, this needs to be done.
It would be a fun little. What if it was just like
Harriet,
literally?
if you are listening,
Wait, no, literal idea. All right. Shoot. Is this first two books? The Aes Sedai test. Yeah, we hear about this in the second book. It's just the Aes Sedai test, but it's like procedurally generated, so it's each level is random, and there's some sort of like puzzle mini game you have to do. That'd be cool,
it's the most genius concept in the world.
right? Anyway, if you want to hire me for your ideas person, Amazon,
But no,
hit
Harriet,
me
if
up.
you hold the rights to video games right now, you need to find somebody who develops virtual reality games. All
It would
right,
also
so
make a
we're
pretty fun
rambling
mobile
now.
game.
Oh,
But
I know. Kind of like they Pokemon Go, and then they did the like Harry Potter thing. They could do another game like that, but Wheel of Time themed, potentially.
anyway,
Just saying.
all
I would
right.
do
I think we need to
look
be
any
wrapping up.
content. I could consume Wheel of Time content like
I want a
by
board
the
game. Like
boatload.
honestly, I know it's silly. I want a board game. I want a themed Wheel of Time board game. It
Just
could
want Wheel of
literally
Time
be Wheel of
Monopoly.
Time Monopoly. Yeah.
I don't even play Monopoly, but I just want it. I will never play it. I might play it once, but for the most part, I just want it. Okay, but we should be wrapping it up. No,
You
that's
could have a little
flashbacks. I
Bella
mean,
figurine. And
it
like
would be Bella.
Hopper.
It'd be Bella, Hopper, the dagger, the heron sword. I might don't know if those two would be too similar, but whatever.
You can make them look different enough.
Bella, Hopper,
A blacksmith's
sword,
hammer.
a dagger, the blacksmith hammer, and then the Aes Sedai symbol. That's 6.
What your railroads could be. It could be like anyway. That's our next episode,
here.
designing Wheel of Time Monopoly. Anyway.
I'm serious. If you want to do that, we could. That
Okay, not right now because it's already getting late, but next time.
Okay, wrapping up. If you're watching or you're listening to this, thank you for holding on, because at this point I would have, no, I'm just kidding. Thank you a lot for listening to us. If you watch this, do the things, I don't know, podcasts, you might be able to like stuff or comment or rate them.
Make sure
Some
you're
podcast
following
apps
us.
you can rate, follow, all the things that make us more popular through algorithms on whatever device or platform you are watching / listening to this.
Yeah.
That's all. Make the algorithms like us more.
And we mentioned it earlier, but we have a Discord down. We have a Discord down in the description you can link. We also click on and join. Currently have a Patreon. And we have our social media is at Pod Another on Twitter and Instagram. And we might be joining Facebook soon. We've been dabbling with that idea, so maybe keep an eye out for that. Anything else? Oh, and Ben mentioned JordanCon earlier. We have a link currently up on Twitter. It's our pinned link for the month to donate to JordanCon's GoFundMe, because they're completely nonprofit. They don't make any money off of the convention. So they're in a bit of a jam right now because of COVID. So if you can spare a little money to donate to JordanCon to kind of help them make it through, that'd be great.
Also, by the time this goes up, I would have already we did a little giveaway on Twitter of a car magnet of our logo, and there might be stuff like that in the future because I feel like making stuff, and it's fun little things I want to make just to see how they look. I'm making them for myself already, so if I make two, I might see about giving it away. So if you're part of our Twitter account, follow our Twitter account, pay attention. There might be more stuff like that in the future.
All right, and we will see you the next time the wheel turns.